There was a woman who sat across from a psychologist in 2019 and said something that stopped the session cold. She said, "I spent 40 years making sure everyone in every room felt comfortable. And I just realized I have never once asked myself whether I was." The psychologist later said it was one of the most precise descriptions of psychological self-erasure he had ever heard in clinical practice. 40 years. Every room. Never once. And what is remarkable is not that this woman was broken. What is remarkable is what she had quietly built inside herself during those 40 years without ever knowing it. Because people who spend decades reading rooms, absorbing tension, managing other people's emotional weather while suppressing their own, they are not just surviving. They are being trained. Trained by reality itself in ways that no classroom, no degree, no seminar can replicate. And what they are trained in is perhaps the rarest form of intelligence on the planet. Most people will never have it, not because they aren't smart enough, but because they never paid the price it costs to develop it. This video is about that price and what it actually buys you. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you changes how you see your entire past. There is a concept in behavioral psychology called hypervigilant attunement. It sounds clinical, but it describes something that millions of people live inside every day without knowing the term for it. Hypervigilant attunement is what develops in people who grew up in emotionally unpredictable environments. Homes where the atmosphere could shift without warning, where reading a parent's face wasn't curiosity, it was survival. Where detecting a change in tone before it became an explosion was the difference between a calm evening and a catastrophic one. Children in those environments do something extraordinary. They begin building what neuroscientists call an expanded social detection system. Their brain literally rewires to notice micro-expressions, vocal shifts, incongruence between words and body language, emotional subtext beneath normal conversation. In other words, they become human lie detectors, human emotional radar systems, before they are 10 years old. Now here is where it gets important. That system doesn't disappear when the childhood ends. It comes with them, into every friendship, every relationship, every workplace, every conversation. And for a long time it feels like a curse, because you cannot turn it off. You walk into a room and feel the tension no one is acknowledging. You have a conversation and sense the resentment underneath the politeness. You meet someone new and something in you is already running calculations that you can't fully explain. And if you've lived this way, you know exactly what I'm describing. That feeling of knowing something is wrong before anyone admits it. That exhaustion of perceiving more than you were ever supposed to perceive. That loneliness of seeing what others seem completely blind to. Early in life, that can feel like a disorder, like you are broken in some way that others are not. But here's the truth, and this is the part that most people never hear. You were never broken. You were being built. The brain is not passive. It responds to its environment with ruthless efficiency. And a brain that spent years in emotional complexity does not come out of that experience fragile. It comes out calibrated. It comes out perceptive in ways that most people will spend entire adult lifetimes trying to develop artificially through books, therapy, and self-help content. You already have what they are searching for. You developed it the hard way, through lived experience at the deepest level. The question is not whether you have it. The question is whether you know you have it, and whether you've learned to use it consciously instead of just suffering under it unconsciously. Let me show you exactly what I mean. There is a psychological principle called somatic intelligence. Your nervous system has been storing information about human behavior since childhood. Patterns of deception, patterns of genuine warmth, patterns of manipulation disguised as love, patterns of trustworthiness versus performance. This is not stored in memory the way a name or date is stored. It is stored in your body, in reflexes, in the tension you feel around certain people, in the ease you feel around others, in the alarm that fires before your conscious mind can explain it. Most people are disconnected from that intelligence entirely. They live from conscious reasoning alone. What someone says, how they present, what logic suggests. They are easily deceived because deception operates at the surface level, and they only read the surface. But people who spent years in emotional complexity learn to read beneath the surface. Instinctively, automatically, often without being able to explain how. And here's what that becomes over time. When you are young, that perception feels chaotic. You feel everything, but you understand very little. You sense that someone is lying, but you doubt yourself. You detect that a relationship is toxic, but you rationalize it away. You know something is wrong, but you lack the experience and vocabulary to name it clearly. That is untrained perception. And untrained perception without frameworks is simply overwhelming. But something happens as you move through life, especially if you move through it with any degree of reflection. Your experiences begin organizing your perceptions. The pattern you sensed but couldn't name in one relationship becomes recognizable in the next. The manipulation you rationalized away once becomes impossible to rationalize away the fifth time you've seen the exact same dynamic. The red flag you dismissed at 20 becomes a confirmed pattern at 35. And slowly, painfully, profoundly, perception becomes discernment. Discernment is different from perception the way a scalpel is different from sensitivity to pain. Pain tells you something is wrong. A scalpel tells you exactly where and why. Perception absorbs. Discernment reads. Perception feels. Discernment understands. And discernment is one of the rarest human qualities that exists. Think about what it actually means. It means you can walk into a conversation and understand the real agenda beneath the stated one. It means you can observe someone's behavior under pressure and accurately predict how they will behave in the future. It means you can distinguish between someone who is genuinely remorseful and someone who is strategically performing remorse to keep access to you. It means you can tell the difference between love and attachment, between support and control, between honesty and managed disclosure. These are not small things. These are the exact skills that determine the quality of every relationship, every decision, every alliance, every boundary in your life. And here's the part that should stop you cold. Those skills are largely unteachable through theory. They can only be truly developed through experience. Specifically through the kind of experience you have already had. The pain was not random. The pain was curriculum. Now let's talk about something that almost nobody discusses in this space. Because everyone talks about the emotional depth of empathic people, the sensitivity, the compassion, the ability to feel what others feel. Those things are real. But there is another dimension to this that gets almost no attention. Strategic clarity. People who have been deeply betrayed, repeatedly misread, chronically underestimated, they develop something that goes beyond emotional sensitivity. They develop a kind of psychological immunity. Not coldness, immunity. There is a profound difference. Coldness is what happens when someone is hurt and they shut down feeling to avoid being hurt again. Immunity is what happens when someone is hurt enough times that they can no longer be fooled by the same mechanisms that used to work on them. Coldness makes you closed. Immunity makes you accurate. And accurate people are extraordinarily difficult to manipulate. Not because they're suspicious of everyone, not because they assume bad intent, but because they have lived long enough to know what genuine looks like versus what performed looks like. And they can tell the difference in a conversation before most people have even registered that there's a difference to notice. This is why con artists, manipulators, narcissistic personalities, they often avoid people who have been through significant emotional pain and come out the other side reflective. Not because those people are aggressive or hostile, but because they are not naive. And exploitation depends almost entirely on naivete. The moment you are no longer naive, you are no longer a viable target. And the moment you are no longer a viable target, your entire social environment begins to shift. Because certain types of people who rely on others being confused, compliant, and emotionally manageable, they lose interest in you. They move on. They find easier territory. And what is left when they leave? The people who stayed anyway. The people who were never there for what they could extract. The people who sought genuine connection rather than strategic access. Your life literally self-selects for quality when you become impossible to exploit. Let that settle for a moment. But there is something that has to happen before any of this becomes real, something internal. And it is the part that costs the most and delivers the most. You have to stop paying for belonging with self-betrayal. Here's what self-betrayal actually looks like in practice, because it is rarely dramatic. It is almost always quiet. It looks like staying quiet when you have something true to say because you know it will make someone uncomfortable. It looks like agreeing with an interpretation of yourself that you know is wrong because correcting it would create conflict. It looks like forgiving before you've processed what actually happened, not because you're healed, but because forgiveness is the socially acceptable exit from discomfort. It looks like being endlessly available to people who are never available when it matters. It looks like editing yourself smaller so that someone else can feel bigger in your presence. And it looks like telling yourself this is just who you are, when actually it is just a strategy you developed to survive in environments that punished you for being fully yourself. That is the deepest wound many empathic people carry. Not what was done to them, but what they learned to do to themselves in response. And this is where the transformation begins. Not with someone else finally understanding you, not with external circumstances finally becoming favorable. It begins the day you decide that who you actually are is worth more than the approval of people who only accepted the edited version. That decision is quiet. It rarely announces itself. It often arrives after exhaustion rather than revelation. After one too many times of giving everything and receiving confusion in return. After realizing that the relationship you've been trying to save never actually felt safe. And when that decision arrives, something in the nervous system shifts. There is a term in psychology called vagal tone. It refers to the responsiveness of the vagus nerve, which governs your body's ability to move between states of activation and calm. People with strong vagal tone recover faster from stress. They de-escalate more easily. They remain present in difficult conversations without flooding or shutting down. Here is what the research shows. Vagal tone improves significantly when people move from chronic stress environments into environments that feel genuinely safe. Not performed safety. Not tolerated dysfunction, genuine safety, meaning your nervous system is not just metaphorically healing when you stop tolerating what depletes you. It is literally physiologically restructuring. Your body is changing, your baseline is shifting, your capacity to think clearly, respond deliberately, and feel without being overwhelmed by feeling is actually increasing. This is not spiritual language, this is biology. And it is one of the reasons mature people who have done the internal work often seem almost physically different from who they were a decade earlier. Calmer, steadier, more present, less reactive. Not because they care less, because their nervous system is finally getting to function the way it was designed to. Now, here is where this connects to power in the most direct way possible. There is a concept I want you to hold on to. It is called the authority of integration. Integration means that what you know, what you feel, what you say, and what you do are all pointing in the same direction. They are congruent, aligned. Most people are not integrated. They know they should leave a relationship and stay. They feel something is wrong and pretend it isn't. They say they value honesty and omit important truths. They believe they deserve respect and accept treatment that contradicts that belief. They are living in internal contradiction. An internal contradiction is exhausting, and it is visible. People can feel internal contradiction in others without being able to name it. They may call it something vague. That person seems off, or I don't know why, but I don't fully trust them, or something feels performative about them. What they are actually detecting is incongruence, the misalignment between what someone is presenting and what they are actually operating from. Now think about what happens when that incongruence resolves. When someone begins living from alignment, when they say what they mean, when they enforce what they believe, when they walk away from what they know is wrong, when they stop translating themselves for people who are committed to misreading them, the presence changes. There is a groundedness that is almost physical, a quality of being that communicates truth before words even begin. That is the authority of integration, and it is deeply compelling to others, not because it seeks to compel, but because authenticity is so rare that when it is fully embodied, it is immediately recognizable. This is the foundation of what I would call earned authority. Not the authority of rank, title, or position. Not the authority of wealth or status. The authority of someone who has been through something real, who has paid for their understanding with actual experience, who speaks from a place that others can feel is not manufactured. And here is the psychological mechanism behind why it works. Human beings have evolved to detect authenticity and deception at a very refined level. Because in tribal environments, the cost of following a deceptive leader was catastrophic. So our nervous systems developed what amounts to a congruence detector, a way of assessing whether what someone presents on the surface matches what they appear to be operating from underneath. When those two things align in another person, we feel it as trustworthiness, as safety, as authority worth following. And people who have done the work of integration, of aligning their inner knowing with their outer life, they consistently register as deeply trustworthy to others. Not because they are performing trustworthiness, because they are not performing anything. And the absence of performance in a world full of performance is itself a form of power. This is why the most influential people in many rooms are not always the most vocal, not always the most credentialed. Often they are the ones who seem the most settled, the most real. The ones whose words carry weight not because of volume, but because of precision, because of conviction, because what they say and what they are match. Now let me tell you something that I want you to carry with you. The transformation we've been discussing, from sensitivity as suffering to sensitivity as strength, does not happen on a fixed timeline. It does not happen because enough time passes. It does not happen automatically. It happens when you decide to stop waiting for external circumstances to validate your internal worth. And that decision looks different for everyone. For some people, it is a single conversation that breaks something open. For others, it is a quiet morning when something internally shifts, and they realize they are no longer willing to negotiate the terms of their own existence with people who never saw them clearly. But it always involves the same fundamental move: choosing your own perception over the consensus of people who benefited from you doubting it. That is the deepest act of power an empathic person can perform, because the machinery of self-doubt is not accidental. It was often installed deliberately by environments, by relationships, by dynamics that required you to question your own knowing in order to remain in them. When you stop questioning your own knowing in service of someone else's comfort, when you trust the alarm that fires before your conscious mind catches up, when you stop translating your experience into language that makes it easier for others to dismiss, something becomes available to you that was never available before. You become undeniable. Not to others first, to yourself first. And once you are undeniable to yourself, the entire architecture of external control begins to collapse. Because external control requires internal cooperation. It requires that you continue doubting yourself enough to accept someone else's definition of you. It requires that you keep paying the toll of self-reduction to remain in the relationship, the room, the dynamic. Remove that cooperation. Remove that doubt. Remove that willingness to remain smaller than you are, and control loses its grip. Not through conflict, not through aggression, simply through clarity. This is the final evolution, the one that most people never fully reach, but that those who do seem to carry with them everywhere. In the quality of their attention, in the precision of their words, in the stillness of their presence when everything around them is in motion. It is not invulnerability. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the complete ownership of feeling. The integration of sensitivity and strength into something that looks from the outside like simply knowing who you are and refusing to apologize for it. And that is perhaps the rarest thing in this world. Because everyone is shaped by their wounds. Most people are controlled by them. Some learn to understand them. But a few, through the kind of internal work that never fully shows on the surface, they transform them. They take what was used to diminish them and they make it the foundation of their authority. They take the sensitivity that was weaponized against them and they sharpen it into discernment. They take the compassion that was exploited and they redirect it with precision toward what deserves it. They take the pain that was supposed to break them and they convert it into the one thing no one can ever take from you once you have genuinely earned it. Understanding. Real, deep, unshakable understanding of human nature, of your own nature, of what matters and what only appears to. And once you have that, you have something that no credential can grant you, no status can simulate, no performance can replicate. You have the one quality that quietly commands every room you walk into, presence rooted in truth. And the question, the only one that really matters now, is this. You already paid the price. The pain happened. The years happened. The betrayals, the confusion, the exhaustion, the rebuilding. You already paid. The only question left is whether you're going to collect what it purchased.